Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast, sponsored by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. Tonight's topic, Kahhhhn! Or, just convention gaming. Here to discuss it with us, welcome back, Scott W., the Savage Cheerleader.
Salute, bitches.
Dave, the rules maven Scott.
Greetings and salutations.
And Chris, the Savage Mommy Fox.
Gobble, gobble.
We are gibless tonight. There are no giblets in this podcast.
The giblets are disgusting.
So I posted earlier this week, I think maybe 2 days ago or less, posted a call for show topics in the Savage Worlds GM community on Google Plus. So if you want to go join that, feel free to do so. But
just run of ideas. We just want to let you fuckers decide what we're going to talk about occasionally.
Well, I mean, at this point, after 3 years, every Wednesday, I think we've covered just about everything there is to cover. But there are those evergreen topics that just won't die. They just continue to keep coming. Yeah. Convention gaming is one of them. So let's talk convention gaming. And we're kind of wrapping this under the umbrella, too, of convention gaming being a one-shot in Savage Worlds terms of one sheet, where it's intended to be a very, very small, encapsulated, contained story from beginning to end, slightly on rails, a little bit of a sandbox, but mostly slightly on rails. So what goes into convention planning? I'm going to attend a con in 2 weeks, and I want to post a game. Where do I start?
Okay, you're wrong right there if you're trying to plan it only 2 weeks in advance. And second of all, the first thing you do is you check the sheet to see if Carl Kiesler is going to be at that particular con, so you know what the bar is for cons.
And if that's the case, you just pack your shit and go home, because nobody's going to beat Carl. It's just not going to happen.
Carl does props, man, but I don't know how he runs a game, so those are two different things.
Chris?
Yeah.
You're fresh off a con, right?
You've seen Carl actually.
That child.
Freaking amazing.
Yes.
The problem with Carl's games, I know this is going to sound weird, it's not a problem. It's the fact that as you're playing, everybody's up taking pictures and getting pictures of all the scenery and the table tents and everything.
He gets paparazzi'd.
He does.
Yeah.
To be fair, I've played a lot of con games. Carl is kind of the outlier. There are people who go to that extreme, but most of the time it's just going to be a map that someone throws down and maybe some tents around the table. So.
Yeah.
The word you're looking for is shit show.
Yeah. Pretty much. And the great thing, I will just go ahead and, while we're sucking Carl's dick, let's just go ahead and swallow. The great thing he does, too, that level of production detail for the theme of the game he's running, I hate to say the word, but immersive. It is immersive. You get a sense of immersion just from a prop contact high.
But that's important, right? We talked about that before on the show, like bennies and card decks. That's a minimum. Yeah, character sheets, and then Carl, he definitely puts this, he gives a shit. So,
well, and I think immersion is one of those things that can be lost on a con game because you've got, however many other tables are in that particular hall and conversations going on at each one of them. The highs of other tables going, when something great happens, or that when someone rolls that critical failure at the opportune moment. That's going to rip your player out of the game they're playing with you to turn and look at that other table to kind of see what's going on. So having something that grabs their attention and kind of holds it to the table is definitely a value add.
And this could have been a good or a bad thing, but at Tacticon, when we had Carl up here as a guest, we had him in his own room with his own table.
No, that's smart.
Where he could shut the door. People still went down and looked at his stuff, and we told people where his stuff was and go look at his stuff. But when he was running his game, we closed the door.
Yeah. Because normally savages together.
Yeah.
In the same room.
Right.
Because they know we're going to fuck up every other game. So.
Well, and so for those of you who've never seen Carl Kieser's work, you're not familiar. Let me just kind of paint a mental picture here. One of the things that he does a 1970s League of Extraordinary Gentlemen kind of one shot, where he takes a Burt Reynolds as the bandit character. There's an Afro disco queen character. He's playing on all the tropes. The thing that he does that is so incredible is to tie that theme together. The character sheets are labels on 8-track cassette tapes. That's the level that we're talking about, where it's the production of what he brings to the table is so closely tied to the theme that it's very easy for you as a player to get into the mode of, okay, we're in a 70s exploitation movie, bad B movie, and we're playing these characters, and it's more of a role play aid really than anything else, because it really helps you get into character.
He takes and he'll take minis and he'll tweak hero clicks and all these things, and the minis look like the character, like Burt Reynolds and Clint Eastwood, from whatever. What was the movie with the monkey, the orangutan?
Every Which Way But Loose,
yeah,
and Every Which Way You Can.
Yeah,
the sequel's much better than the original.
It was amazing.
But we've talked about this too. If you're going to run a Scooby-Doo game, invest $1.80, $1.98. Go to Walmart and get the Scooby-Doo snacks as bennies.
Yeah, that's what I did.
That kind of level.
Yeah,
right.
And I mean, the dollar store, you don't have to spend a lot of money to achieve this. I know Carl once was asked, how does he pull off the minis? And he said he goes to, eBay. He buys the old run HeroClix stuff that like no one wants, where he can pay like $2 and get 10 models. Yeah. A quarter a piece or less, and then he turns around and cuts them off the base they're on, repaints them to suit his needs, and then puts them on a RPG base like you can get for Warhammer, etc. Something that fits whatever hex map he's using.
Right. Of course, it doesn't hurt that his professional career as a graphic designer and access to Photoshop and all kinds of other incredible resources.
And that he has that artist's eye, right? By being a graphic artist, but he's the kind of person who could look at a brick of fucking marble and see David inside of it and then bring it out. So
right.
I really, really hope he doesn't see my face in other places. That would be a horrific existence. But the other aspect of it, though, that I would point out would be other aids that are out there. Like, I know Chris and I both have talked about what is it, the GM toolkit, or the there's a guy on YouTube. He talks about you take and you paint on tiles so you can have a set of tiles. Well, there's other guys out there, like Frank Turfler's doing this, where here's a map and here's the instructions on cut here, and then super glue that to the styrofoam. And you have the geodesic tiles to lay down.
We're talking about GM Scotty.
Yeah, GM Scotty, who does a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And you can for $5-6 and a little bit of printer ink set yourself up with a lot of these props without having to have that artistic level yourself as well.
Yeah, totally too. So.
Yeah. Right, and even on the low end of that scale, there are tons of print and fold, like hard cardboard, like not cardboard, but paper craft kind of models you can use for airships and things like that as well. So part of a good con experience is really going to be your presentation at the table.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. The fortunate thing is that Savage Worlds characters can fit on an index card, like a 3x5 index card. So you could be playing, for example, let's say you wanted to do a kind of a rendition of Friday the 13th with the camp counselors. You can just go get pictures of each of them and actually insert a badge and a lanyard, and that's your character sheet.
Right, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And it fits the theme of the game. The players just sit there with it around their neck. You look across the table, it says Chad. On the back of it, when he looks at it, it's got all the stats. He's good. So, I mean, there's a lot of things you could do creatively to kind of match that level of production is really what we're talking about. It's a production and presentation level at the table.
I think at the end of the day, the adventure itself shouldn't take you much longer to prep than a standard, session at home, which I know for many of us is minutes. I know I can prep an entire adventure in about 15 minutes, and that's even, talking about where I've got to go onto Fantasy Grounds and set up tokens or, grab an NPC and tweak it slightly. It's still, 10, 15 minutes is all I need to prep a session. That's one of the reasons we play Savage Worlds. Now you're going to add weeks to that to prep all those game ads, all the props, the character sheets. Take a look at that character sheet, create it once, come back to it, a couple weeks later and reread it and make sure that it still makes sense to you. Come back another week later, hand it to somebody else who maybe has never even played Savage Worlds and see if they could find things that you call out to look for on that sheet so that that character sheet, even if you get that player who's never played Savage Worlds who sits down at your table at the con, now you've got a teaching aid in their hand that when you say, hey, give me an agility roll, they can find it easily on the sheet.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, table presentation aside, the immersive quality of picking the right bennies and card backs, put that aside. In game preparation for a convention, you need to have a good story. I mean, you need to have at least that should really be what you're there for is a good story.
More fucking real.
So come up with something. Don't write a novel, but just a great. I would say that if you were going to create a one-shot or a convention game in prep, you might just want to walk around for a week with a notepad and just write down like what you would think you would see on like IMDb as a movie description.
Yeah. Like
buddy cops struggle against the Italian mafia to squell drugs on the streets or whatever. A recently divorced, the son or the children of a recently divorced family harbor an alien. A New York cop finds himself in the middle of a hostage situation and a terrorist situation. Whatever. I mean, just come up with sort of a story hook, an idea hook, and then don't really do much with it from there. Kind of understand where it's going to take place as far as the place and who the players are that are involved. I think one of the most important things I would say as far as a convention game or a one-shot is create characters for the players to play without using the character creation rules.
Yeah. Yes.
Most definitely.
Yep.
If you want them to have two-fisted, they don't need to meet the requirements. They just fucking have two-fisted.
Yeah, no one's really going to know, and if they do know, most people won't say shit.
Yeah. And I would recommend, too, keeping it down to maybe 3 or 4 edges.
Yep.
Yeah, I've run into those diehards before who have been like, well, you gave this guy this, and he doesn't meet the requirements for this. And I'm like, recently, it's been the past few cons, I've told them, hey, I'm not creating these by the rules of creating a PC.
Right.
I don't do that.
It's not that important for a one-shot.
No. What I do is a lot of my characters, I'll create them in Hero Lab, and I'll turn off the rules. Basically, you create them as an NPC.
Yep.
I will say, keep an idea of point-wise what you've given them, though. Even if they didn't meet the requirements for two-fisted, but it's still an edge. It still counts as the points for an edge to have gotten there. So, and this is not to say that you're trying to balance the game as much as you're just trying to make sure everybody gets kind of an equal level player character at the table. You don't want somebody to sit down at the table and feel like they got gypped because they got the wrong character.
Yeah, you should go. Sorry.
Well,
20 or 25 XP, right, is a good average.
Yeah, I would not allow it to exceed seasoned by much. Otherwise, you're also going to run into the other end of the spectrum, which is analysis paralysis.
Yeah,
you're dealing with a player who's never seen that character before, and they have, let's say 3.5 hours to fit that whole game in. They don't have time to learn a heroic or even, much less a legendary level character, and all the different, things that you put in that are, hey, this is a really great combo that the player who sits down and looks at that 3x5 card may never see.
And I'd say that's 3.5 hours if you're lucky, because a 4-hour session, it's really only about 3 hours.
Yeah, I was going to say 3.5 hours is really stretching it, but I would even say you might be bordering 2 hours, 45 minutes, depending on how quickly you can get people on task playing the game.
Yep.
Right. And I would recommend doing this too. Take the liberty as the GM that's putting together this con game. Don't assume that all the people who come to your game are familiar with Savage Worlds.
Right.
You'll have a much better con experience and a much better game experience at the table if you put a description, even if it's from the summary of edges and hindrances, just copying and pasting it on an edge.
Yeah.
Like, for example, you could say bloodthirsty. And then you could say Caval's family was murdered by orcs. He goes into a blood fugue and slays every orc he meets. That's sufficient for the con game because you're trying to get across what the hindrance is and how it relates to the character that's being played. If they have the acrobatic edge, put on there, the character is a parkour expert, +2 to agility rolls with acrobatic feats. Just give the players an idea so that everybody's not going, wait, what does this edge do? I don't, what?
Yeah, I do something similar, and I'll do exactly that. Just take that example or the short excerpt, and I'll make a completely second page, and I'll staple it to the character sheet.
And one thing I would add along with that, when it comes to the hindrances, the edges, player uses something specifically from that character sheet effectively like that. You put on there that they're a parkour expert, and they tie that into a description. That you put on there that this is a hindrance they have. They hate all orcs, and they actually role play that out. Make sure you're awarding that with bennies. Yeah. I don't care how many bennies you give a player during a con game. Give them out. That's what they're there for at that time.
Yeah.
I'm also going to add this caveat too. Be a dick GM and make sure that their hindrances come into play, the opportunity for their hindrances to come into play fit the story in a dramatic and significant way.
Yeah, that's part of your planning, right? When you're doing the story, definitely make sure when you're picking hindrances, you got to capture what you can fuck with people, right? And make them go, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to have to, compromise my fucking morals and ethics on this one and acting character versus me.
Right. If it's a high action type of thing, give one of the characters cautious.
Yep.
But also screw them and give them curious.
Yep.
So they have to, I really want to find out what's going on, but guns. Yep. Because those hindrances are fun to play, especially when you as a GM point out, you are cautious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you really just run into the bill room without some kind of plan?
Create a character that's a minor pacifist, major bloodthirsty, and has a blood feud with a specific thing. And make that player try to tweak that and make it work at the table. Although, not to pat ourselves in the back too much, I'm going to point to Jared's ETU game, where he created characters for that. And Chris's character, the jock cowboy quarterback, is afraid of old people. He has phobia geriatrics, and the third session Jared planned to play was one where you're in just a freaking retirement village of trailers filled with old people zombies, which was amazing. It absolutely, you give the player character something that's going to be almost crippling to them in that scene, and make them come up with an answer for it.
Yep.
Right, because it's all about giving every player at the table a spotlight moment with their character. I mean, while they're gaming, it's memorable. I didn't mention this at the top of the show, but if you do have questions, we're not running a live chat anymore. I know there is a live chat on the YouTube live channel, but we're not watching that and trying to broadcast at the same time. So if you have a question, you have a comment, savagedaddy@gmail.com. We'll try to read them on the show. So we kind of talked about hindrances, customizing the hindrances and edges to the game. I would almost say, too, limit the skills for the NPCs to maybe 5
Absolutely.
or 7. Not every player character needs notice. Nope. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to jump down this rabbit hole here real quick. So even from a character creation standpoint, if you kind of take a look at skills and you judge them on a scale based on the die type that there is available, a D4 should mean that the character has some level of introductory training in something or just a natural ability or inclination. A D6 should mean that they've had formalized training, maybe part of part of their job or formalized training. If they have a D8 is professional level skill. A D10, you're bordering on mastery of that skill. And a D12, world famous guru, 1 in a million people who can do something. Now, I'm going to ask you this. If the character concept is not grizzled beat cop and is not cub reporter, should they really have any notice at all? If notice is a skill that you're trained to do, should they really have notice at all?
Yes.
No, not in every instance. I just played Realms of Cthulhu, and one of the characters didn't have notice. Hell, none of them had fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So their parry was very, very fucking low, but they weren't combatants.
Right.
So all I'm saying with this is, as a GM, consider your story, consider the characters that are part of it, and don't try to make game mechanic decisions. Make character-based decisions.
Yep.
I would say if you're planning to run a con game, a couple of things you need to become very familiar with outside of the rules to the game and all of the things that we talked about up to this point is, from a storytelling standpoint, be very familiar with the 5-man band so that you can build player characters that fit together perfectly to mesh into a team. That way your players have a reason for those characters to work together at the table. And then also be very familiar with a timed show. Take a look at any of your sitcoms that only run a half hour. They've got a major story beat every 5 to 10 minutes to make sure they're keeping that thing moving forward. Because, maybe jot yourself little notes that, an hour into your game, this major event needs to have happened. Otherwise, you're not going to have time to get to it. And you need to have an idea of how long it takes to run that game, so that when you look up the clock and you're at 2.5 hours in, you know how much time you have left. Make sure you can get the climax in that time frame. It's definitely something you want to understand, the structure of telling a story over time.
Yeah, I was at the MazeCon, right, over the holiday weekend, and I want to say 2 of the Savage Worlds games went overtime, 1 almost by a fucking hour, which makes it hard when you got to go to another game, right? So you're fucking with people's ability to rest, eat, drink, all that shit. So yeah, you have to be cognizant of your time.
Yeah, you gotta stay on time, because if that were me and it would gone over an hour, I would have gotten up and left.
Right. I mean, we were having a good time, but I mean, yeah, right. It was getting rough. And
but at our local cons, we have an hour between slots.
Yeah, that's how this was too. There was an hour.
Like you said, that's your hour to eat, run back to your hotel room.
Yep.
You got to not do that to people.
Yeah,
my problem is I always feel like I'm not going to have enough in my con games. I always feel like they're going to go too short, and then I'm always rushing at the end.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with wrapping it up. So I know most cons are like, hey, if you want to fill 4 hours, fill 4 hours. But I mean, quite honestly, if you're at 3 hours and your game ends, that's not that big of a deal. Most people aren't going to get pissed off because you are getting a reprieve. So,
well, let's talk about that real quick for a moment. You've planned this adventure. You get to the 3 hour mark and you realize, oh shit, I'm only halfway through it.
You better start cutting shit out. So I write all my adventures on index cards, right? So like day after Ragnarok, the one I ran was, I think it was like maybe 6 index cards, like regular 3x5 cards. And so the opening scene is the prologue, and it is high action combat with a dramatic task, and then they meet their NPC they're going to look for later. So the next one is, missing in action, and they get their mission briefing, and they get to do a little role playing. The next one is their decision tree is now okay, snitches, right? So now they're going to go look for a dude who was working with the guy they're looking for. Bam. Okay, or they're going to go and check this thing out. Okay, there's 2 trees. And no matter what, it's going to diamond out and come right back into the railroad. But they still feel like they have choices. Or they can split the party and do that. And then it's like, okay, now you're going to investigate the next spot A. Oh, okay, well, lo and behold, you got to go to spot B. Okay, well, there's your cards, and then there's your final battle, and fucking wrap it up. And if you need to, you can cut out any one of those cards at any time.
Yeah, you want to make sure your con game has a main plot line that runs through it that you can leapfrog if you need to save time. The other aspect to it, though, is also, where I talked about, be cognizant of how long something takes. If as a GM you're sitting there looking at the clock and hey, we've got an hour left and I've got a whole nother scene to run, then this is the scene where you're not spending any GM bennies. You're not making this more difficult for the players. You're awarding extra bennies to them to get them doing those bombastic things that are going to bring that scene to a close more quickly. You want to fuel that fire in that moment. Whereas if, you do have a game that's starting to kind of wrap up and you're going to be done in 2 hours, you need to stretch it. Well, that's a scene where, oh no, the wildcard NPCs absolutely do soak wounds, and you have those tools at your disposal that you have to think of a little differently with a con game than you do for a home game, where if we run short on time, we can just wrap up and pick up next week.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and the other thing too, you do have the other option. Okay, come the other option. This ain't Pathfinder. Your NPCs don't fight to the death.
Right, yeah.
You decide, you know what? A third of their party's taking wounds. No, they DTFO. They're gone.
Yeah.
And then you could run a chase if you wanted.
Because the party's going to want to chase them down.
Right.
Well, yeah, right. They're not going to let them go. They're going to get angry when you have to explain. And I did that with, I think it was the day after. Yeah, it was the day after Ragnarok. Was like, look, we're all here at the fucking convention table, so nod, wink, wink. Certain things they're going to have to happen, so we can move this forward. And everyone was really cool about it. Like, yeah, okay, we get it.
Oh yeah, I think every player in the convention game understands. Hey, this is on rails. They want cues, they want plot hooks.
Yeah.
They're willing to go along with you. For the first thing you wave at them or drop down at them, they get the idea. Oh, we've got 4 hours to bang this out. Let's go. They're not about, dude, my player agency, and you're not letting me make choices.
No.
Yeah, not so much.
Well, sort of.
Now you can always, if you're like, oh shit, I just need 20 more minutes, but I've only got 5. Well, guess what? Run a dramatic task and close it on a crescendo.
Has to be something, right? I mean,
right. Any of the mechanics that are in the game, dramatic task, chase, mass combat, you can find something that's going to take a 5-minute scene and stretch that thing into 20 real easy.
And that's what I will suggest, too, that you do is you try to fit as much of Savage Worlds, sort of the unique aspects, as you can into your scenario. So, like I said, at Day After Ragnarok, when their prologue started, it was a firefight for a majority of the party. But while we're dealing that initiative for the gunfight, the initiative card for their SAS mission specialist was a dramatic task because he had to try to shut down the Ophi oil tanks before they fucking detonated in this warehouse. Meanwhile, everyone else is fighting Soviet guerrilla fucking troops. So,
and the nice part with that is you just deal them into the combat round. And when their initiative card comes up, you handle that round of the dramatic task and just keep rolling.
Absolutely. Then you can do try to get a social conflict in there no matter what. But just try to get as much Savage Worlds as you can in there to let them see, like, oh, okay, well, this system can definitely handle fucking everything I can think of.
Right. And I would also say cheat as a GM. Cheat on the player's behalf.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? That's not a bad move there, Bob. But if you and he ganged up,
yes,
that would add this. Or
don't be a cunt. Yeah, help people out.
Yeah, teach them the game.
Yeah,
they're new.
Right. You keep trying to hit his parry, and you've taken 3 swings at him. Maybe you might want to try pushing him to the ground.
Right. Yeah.
Wild attack.
Or wild attack, or Maybe you want to taunt him, or maybe you want to do an agility trick so everybody gets a +2 to attack him. Yeah.
And hopefully you'll get players who really know the system and they can help out. Like I played Charles as Olympus Inc., and that is what I was doing with the character I was playing. I was a Jovian descendant and the leader type, right? So, and all my edges revolved around me using the bennies at the table and the card, manipulating bennies and cards. And so, yeah, I was setting up shit for like intimidations, taunts, and all that shit for everyone else, because it's not for you, really, right? You're setting everyone else up for success who don't have the higher combat abilities.
Right. I would also recommend. Oh shit, brain fart.
That's all right.
Give me a second.
Knowing your adventure, knowing how to run the game. There's a lot of things you should need to know.
Yeah, I'll throw one in there while he's burning the gray matter. Adventure cards are not a bad option for a con game either, because they almost always work in favor of the player.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Use them and have a great time with them.
See, I wouldn't do that just because they can. I mean, you have that limited amount of time, and they can take you completely off track. I know sometimes that can be great. Maybe not so much for a con game, in my opinion. I wouldn't use them.
Well, I would disagree. I would disagree for one reason, Chris. I know that you like a very structured, organized game without a lot of surprises. If you're very comfortable as an improvisational GM, go for it.
Yeah,
it can really take the plot way off the rails and be very, very entertaining. I agree. That deck is a screw the GM and just punch holes in plots like crazy.
It's a fucking deck of many things, right? Like it's a no shit deck of many things.
Now, if you're not, I would agree with Chris on this. If you're not experienced with Savage Worlds, rules, avoid adventure decks like the plague. I would say too, make sure that you have, as you know, school marmy as this sounds, a set of dice for each player at the table.
Yeah.
A pencil for each player at the table. Bring out the freaking school supplies, because somebody's going to go, I forgot, I don't have any dice. Yeah. You
know what I say? Run to the dealer's hall and buy yourself some.
Why are you bullshitting, right? It's like right around the corner normally.
Yeah. Go buy some.
Great deals. Since they're the only dice vendor in town, guess what you're paying?
Not my job to supply your dice.
Now, I'm split on this one. If it's, the stuff like I can pick up, school notebooks for like 5 cents a piece right after the back to school sale ends, when Walmart and Meijer and your local store is just trying to clear them out, you could walk in there and pick up, 24 of these spiral bound notebooks for 5 cents a piece. Absolutely. I've got stuff I can just hand out as far as supplies at the table. If we're talking about dice, there's a dealer shop right around the corner. Hit Dealer Row. And don't take money out of the vendors that are there making the con possible. Don't take money out of their pockets.
I'll hand out index cards, and I have a big thing of pencils that I keep with me. I think the big thing is dice. Dice are not my responsibility to provide your dice. You're coming to a gaming con.
I'm with Chris.
You should probably have your own dice.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Let me ask a question. How do you feel about making sure everybody's got a same identical wild die? If they've never played Savage Worlds before,
that's fine because
you can brand it and pimp your shit. Yeah, exactly.
Right here, baby. Rocky Mountain Savages wild dice.
Exactly.
We get everybody at the con one.
Yeah, you gotta, right? Because it really brings the game to life. It's part of the table prep. I ordered the stupid fucking bullet dice that I forgot who put them on the goddamn fucking Google page.
That would be Dave.
They're pretty fucking cool.
Hate those dice. I mean, they are.
Do they actually roll?
Yeah, they roll. It's like a fucking sideways crystal die.
Yeah, okay. It's one of those things. I'm not a big fan of any kind of specialty shaped dice, but those are really cool, especially if they fit.
You mean like anything besides a D6? You fuck.
I'm not a big fan of those dice, but
Aha! The great matter is spoken. Let the players be badasses.
Yes.
Set them up to win.
Yes, let them win.
Let them win. Help them win. Cheat to make sure they win. Write an adventure where they are the end-all, be-all of badass.
Yep.
And let them experience that in the 4-hour period.
Yep.
Don't be the controversial, antagonistic GM. Let them, and here's the thing you're going to find, too. Now, there's all this, rumor and bullshit, all this topic. Well, the adversarial GM. I'm going to tell you something. My experience as a GM is players are way more adversarial to the GM than could ever think about being.
Of course, you're outnumbered by like 5-1.
Because every time a player scores like 5 wounds, that player automatically goes, "Yeah, soak that shit, bitch."
Yep.
Wait a minute. Whoa, where's this hostility coming from?
Well, that's the thing too, is you got to be able to control your table on players because, we were playing Olympus Inc. and it was getting late at night. Right, we had the 2000 or the 8 o'clock at night to the midnight game, and you'll have players who we had the one dude who he crossed the fucking table and came and stood next to me and was looking at our Aphrodite. So that was our face character. And he was like, "I don't know why you're not using any of your fucking abilities. Why aren't you doing this skill?" And then at one point we were, I was trying to wrap up the session, right? Because I'm like, "Hey, Charles, this is awesome, but it's getting close to midnight. So as the fucking Jovian leader, I'm going to go in and just wreak havoc on this." And my friend was playing. He was a mercurial infiltrator, right? So a spy. And he went to the top of this hotel. And I'm coming in, and Charles drops this, demigod in front of me, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, friend or foe?" And he's like, "Oh, she seems distraught and kind of lost." So I was like, "Pop, pop, pop!" 3-round burst, and I go up the fucking stairs. And the one dude is like, "I don't understand. You're the leader. Why aren't you trying to talk to her?" I was like, "Perhaps you don't understand tactical leadership." And the fucking face character sitting next to me, right? And so he started getting a little belligerent about it. So here's the part where you got to stop and realize that. So I'm 6'3", 235. I don't have a small man's build, and as the corpsmen tell me, I got the build of a fucking athlete, right? So my biceps are probably as large as most gamers' fucking thighs, and man, there's a point where, and I don't sit down when I game, and like that dude had me so pissed off, and I'm starting to loom over the fucking table and lean in on him, and then my boy is getting ready to beat the shit out of this guy because it wasn't Charles' fault at all. Charles realized what was happening, that the guy's just being a douche. But I don't know, man.
Yeah.
You got to control that table.
You have to control your table. You have to be able to read your table as well. If you have one player that's just constantly making all decisions, go, "Hey, that's great. Hold on a second. What does Elizabeth think about what's going on?" Like,
right.
if direct attention to another player.
Yeah.
If you sense they're complete wallflowers and totally uncomfortable with it, that's fine. Move on.
Yeah, sure.
But, understand the pacing at your table. And then I would say, too, that one of the best things you can do for a con game is break the mold and come up with the most interesting villain, the most interesting NPCs
Make them
that you
hate
can
them.
think of. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Play bait and switch with the players in the NPC. Yeah. Like, for example, in the middle of a battlefield, here comes this 8-year-old girl dragging a huge sword.
Right.
And everybody's just like, "Ha ha," and then she turns at you and she grows to the size of like 3 orcs.
Yeah.
She doesn't even
she
just
swings it, right?
D12 strength behind it, I think there's something to be said with playing with those things. There's also something to be said with don't just tack on more toughness, a higher parry. No. Don't buff up your bad guys to make them big and bad.
Yeah.
Give them a great description. Set the fight in a smoke-filled room. Do something other than tacking on another edge or tacking on a few more points to parry and toughness to make that an interesting fight. Give them something to remember other than, "Hey, I had to roll an 18 to do action."
Right, yeah. It's just frustrating.
Right, and play with the tropes too. I would say, start the session off with in full media array with a combat, like a fist just landed in your face. You're shaken. What? Yeah, you pull back. You're in the middle of a bar fight. Let the bar fight go for like 3 rounds max, and then announce, "Oh, you wake up by a campfire. You just had a nightmare." I mean, that's what I'm talking about with the bait and switch kind of stuff. Use a little trick and a little gimmick here and there. Pepper it lightly throughout the session, but like don't make everything a dream. Don't make everything a. But if you want to introduce new players to combat, then you're in a bar, you just got smashed in the face.
Yeah.
And then look at one of the other players and go, "What's going on? Why are you guys in a bar fight?"
Yeah, exactly, right? Because most games, so in my vast con experience of one con, however, having played enough games in that con, every game that wasn't Savage Worlds started the same boring fucking way, and it's like, what the fuck are you people doing? And so Olympus Inc. started pretty neat because it was like, okay, here's your mission, here's what you're doing, and bam, you're on the edge of this warehouse. So how are you going to do this mission? The Rifts game was, it was all right. It was kind of a standard briefing, but the dude flowed with everything we did. So like when I started my Day After Ragnarok, I knew the table was probably expecting the generic old dumb shit. So we went on the table, we're talking a little bit. I was like, all right, everyone happy with their characters? And they're like, yeah. I was like, everyone understands their role? And they're like, yeah. I was like, all right. Automatic fire starts ringing out through the warehouse that you're in. The tanks are starting to boil over. The pressure tanks are starting to blow. What the fuck do you guys do, and how do you get out of this situation? And then that was it. I dealt cards out in initiative, and we were on. They were just like, holy shit. And you got to work the table, When I was doing the descriptions and shit, right? So you got to really put yourself out there, I think. Like I said, I don't sit down. And so, like, when I was doing the Soviet Guerrilla Men, I'm climbing over other players and shit, and I'm just doing the 3-armed crawl towards them and shit, and I'm doing it in the air. And they were just like, holy shit. But, I mean, it was nothing but kudos. And they're just like, I've never seen that before. I'm like, well, yeah, because your GM sucks.
Well, bring energy to the table. Be bummed out. Go way outside the box. Scott, just now when you were describing that scene, all of a sudden your tone goes up, your shoulders come up, your energy level comes up. You start projecting and start smacking your hands together. That immediately draws the players into, whoa, okay, wait a minute. Now we're not just shooting this shit and talking about something's happening.
Yep.
Give them those cues when things are happening, I think is a big part of that. And like you said, you're working the room. If this is something you're absolutely not comfortable with, find a night class and learn how to do, a stage performance. Take a single acting class or a single improv class where you have to stand up in front of an audience and say something.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, by the time you're done with that, doing it to a group of 5 people at a con table, it's not going to be a problem anymore.
You know what I've heard people talk about is Toastmasters.
Yes. Yeah.
Go to Toastmasters.
Yep. It's just getting prepared for impromptu speaking, and extemporaneous speaking if you're running a game, right? I just put myself in the fucking eye. But yeah, it's extemporaneous speaking. But yeah, Dave is right. I mean, and if you're not comfortable doing it, I'll tell you this. So I played over 3 days, and I'll tell you that only maybe 1 out of 10 Savage Worlds GMs I saw sat down at the table. That was amazing. I thought it was, because I always was told it was received as odd by non-Savage Worlds players, but all the GMs stood up, most of the players stood up, and it's super loud. I mean, I had a juicer in Rifts, and I went rodeo clown on a fucking summoned chimera, and I'm on my fucking chair in the thing, doing rodeo clown and shit. So, and other people like, fuck yeah, standing up, fucking throwing dice and shit in the air, casting magic spells and shit. It was just, I love Savage Worlds.
The thing to remember, too, is as a GM, and I'm going to kind of circle back to this, I think one of the things that's overlooked as far as GMs, your bennies are dog treats. They are intended to reinforce the behavior you want at your table. So if you get a player like Scott that stands up and does the 3-arm, start throwing bennies to that bitch.
Yep.
Go, that is amazing. Just start throwing bennies at him.
Yep.
There is a little bit of competitive nature among the players. Well, shit, he got all those bennies.
Yep.
That's what you get bennies for? All right. I stand up and And even if they don't do a great job, give them bennies for the effort.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
I've said more than one time, there is no such thing as a bad accent in role playing.
Nope.
As a matter of fact, in my world, I'll just share a story. You cannot have a bad accent. There's a lot of accents as a GM that I will start off as Latin, immediately roll into Russian, and end up somewhere between French and German. In the course of a single sentence. We were playing a Dave's Pirate game. I was a player in Dave's Pirate game on the Spanish main. The character spoke Dutch. I'm like, how would you, Dutch accent? So I just went, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I did the worst Keanu Reeves impersonation and said that was my Dutch speaking voice.
Hey, man,
Keanu, and we're talking like he did Keanu Reeves from Bram Stoker's Dracula. Keanu Reeves, like early in his career, trying to do another accent so he doesn't want to sound like himself. Horrible, but amazing, Benny-worthy every time.
Look, yeah, man.
So yeah, let those bennies flow. Let players know that they're not just. I think a lot of players and GMs think that you only hand out bennies when the characters role play their hindrances.
Yeah, it's just nothing.
Yeah, if they do an excellent job in role playing. If they suck up a failure, this will surprise everybody at the table. Like, okay, it's a critical moment. You just rolled. Nope, I'm sticking with it. I'm not spending any bennies. I'm going to suck up the failure. If that makes the story more interesting and dramatic way, immediately give them a benny.
Okay, I'm gonna dovetail that with one caveat. If you're using the adventure deck, be aware of what card the motherfucker is holding. Because if you get a player who gets hit by your big bad and says, I take it and go to the ground, and they've got a stack of bennies and they don't want to soak wounds, you're facing an adventure card on their turn. Be aware of it.
Whatever.
It's all good at the end, right? And I think something, too, if you're not the kind of GM who can stand up at the table for the entire game and pantomime and do all that and have that kind of energy, that's fine. Substitute it with giving the most cinematic descriptions of something that you can.
Yeah.
Think in terms of cinema.
Yeah.
Be a loquacious son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Everything is dripping with description in that game.
Yep.
So, I mean, just think of something. Think back to like when you were 12. And if you're in this kind of age group, you probably saw Star Wars on the big screen for the first time. Went and told your friends, and there was this guy with a laser sword and a helmet, and he threw people across, and the ship came in from the beginning.
Yep.
That kind of description, if you're not going to stand up and pantomime.
It goes a long way. It really does. It really does. And coax bennies out of people. Because, we've all talked about it. They're not hit points.
Mm-hmm.
Coax them out. Like, here, you can do this, man. You use that motherfucking benny.
Yeah, and when a player does that thing, that really cool thing, tell them, hey, this is a great time. Spend that benny. Get ahead on it. Or, it's a dramatic task, and they just got a single success, and that, hey, we've seen a lot of cards. We haven't seen a club come up, and I haven't reshuffled the deck. That's the time to say, you guys might want to consider burn a benny here and try to get those raises so that you're not facing a, complication, and suddenly, the whole dramatic task can come crumbling down on your head.
Yeah. Right. Same thing, too, with, a player draws a joker. Tell them, hey, you know what? You've got a +2 to everything. This might be a time to take more than one action because it will cancel out the negative.
Absolutely, right?
This is a great time to spend bennies like a bitch because it's +2 to everything.
Yeah, because they don't know the rules. So if you're not helping them and telling them these things that are in the rules that they can do, they're never going to know.
Nope.
Obviously, if you have some seasoned players, yes, but a lot of times you're going to get one or two new people.
Yep.
And do that. Let them know the rules and how to use those to their benefit.
And two, with what Chris said is you'd be surprised that one, I found out, is that not everyone has played Savage Worlds the way I've played it, right? So fast and loose and crazy and all that shit. A lot of people play Savage Worlds just like if it was D&D or Pathfinder. And so their knowledge of the rules may not be as broad. It may be very focused, and they may not have seen a lot of the extra shit that come into play, like taunt and intimidation and tricks and all that jazz. Because it's not how their brains have been trained to think with Savage Worlds. And so, yeah, even with seasoned players, I had folks who were like, oh, fuck, I didn't think about doing that.
Well, we've had moments ourselves where, we've been playing this game for 10 years, and then all of a sudden something comes to light, and it's like, we've never done that scene in that way before with that rule, and now suddenly, oh, wait, no, we've been doing it backwards. We turned it on its head in some manner. Be aware of that, but the other thing I would say, be aware, as a GM, one of the rules is you actually determine what that dice result means. You go on to extrapolate that. Somebody sits there and does the bombastic roll, hits with a raise, and then rolls, 8 wounds on the 8 wounds worth of damage. Describe them taking off the head of that guy and continuing the blow into the next one to speed that scene up if you need to. Or, in that moment, toss the guy a Benny and have him describe that scene when you need to slow it down. You're going to give that player more energy at the table, but you're also going to slow the scene down as you take time to give this visceral description. Be aware of how to play the table using those rules as well.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the rules and those types of things and about new players. And something that we haven't brought up yet is, along with all those character sheets and telling them what those edges and those hindrances are, if you can find something like Morin's sheet here, or just the combat survival guide, or some of those tools, I don't think it's a bad idea to have, along with the character sheet even stapled to it, some kind of cheat sheet or aid around those rules, because then they can take that with them. And if they've never played Savage Worlds, they might not own a book, but they might take this cheat sheet with them, and it might spark that interest, and you might be making a new Savage Worlds player who's going to go out and look for the book and things like that, because you've given them just that little bit of extra knowledge that they didn't have.
First taste is free.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, man. For real. I converted one of my friends, hard-nosed D&D player, just over the last year. He is a fucking born-again hard savage.
The other thing, too, I would remind players, all players, even experienced players, you run into this. What do you do? And then you see the top of their heads, so look at their sheet.
Look at the character sheet.
Dude, well, I'm seeing what skills I've got. You don't even need a skill to roll it. Just tell me what you do.
Right, yeah.
Well, I'm going to try to sneak up on him, but I don't have stealth. That's okay. Pick up a D4 and a D6, roll it in a -2. Go. You don't have to have the skill to attempt it.
Right.
You can take as many actions in a round as you would like.
Yeah.
Scott, what's your favorite thing to say about wizards in Savage Worlds? The way you would play a wizard in Savage Worlds, you've said it 1,000 times.
No, but they're multi-action, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you cast a spell, throw a dagger, walk up and hit someone in the dick with a staff. That's all doable.
All in one round. Yeah.
All in one round. It all depends on how many bennies you got and what you fucking have statted your character at. You may have statted your character to do that. That's the thing, too, is you catch players off guard is, like, the first time I'll play with people, well, every session we'll have, but the first time is, the first time they kill something or succeed at something, I immediately do the, like, all right, you fucking bullshit up this guy, and how does that look when you fucking in that fucker? And for most players, it's sort of that, like, oh, shit. And then real quickly, they're like, oh, all right, fuck yeah, his dick falls off and flies in his mouth. I'm like, all right, fucking awesome, take a penny. Let's move on to the next fucking round.
Right.
The other thing I would say is that player who's been staring at their sheet all night, you've been coaxing them. Hey, just describe it to me and I'll tell you what you need to roll. Don't look at the sheet. When they finally stop looking at that character sheet for approval of what they're doing before they tell it to you, award that with a Benny immediately.
Yeah.
Hey, great. That's an awesome idea. Here's a Benny for, adding that to the scene. This is what I need you to roll.
It's a fucking con game. What are you afraid of? Bennies are going to go. They all go away anyway, but they really go away for a fucking con game. What are they going to do? Win? Oh, no. Great. They spent hundreds of dollars for you to fucking entertain them for a few hours. Yeah, maybe you should let them have a great time.
So let's, so we've talked about how to run the table. We've talked about some prep. How do I design an adventure for a con?
I told you, man. The cards are your best friends.
Yeah, scenes.
So,
Break it into scenes.
Okay, let's do that. As an example, let's create a one shot for a con, live and impromptu.
All right.
Genre. What genre are we going to be running this in? I would like to see like a modern day action, a lot of guns and explosions.
Let's do modern, like maybe intel operators in the war zone, right? Dark magic.
Okay.
All right.
So, are they a team of mercs? Is that why they're all working together?
It could be Blackwater, right? A team of Blackwater guys. That's the best way to go about it because you have a broad set of skills and you got a mercenary unit paid by the government contracts to go and do crazy shit.
Okay. What is the goal? What do they have to accomplish at the end of this adventure? What's the finish? Where's the finish line, so to speak?
Suppress whatever. So we're going to go dark magic, right? So they're going to have to overcome their fears of realization about the true universe and suppress an evil.
So I would say start this off with a bait and switch. I would say you hand the players a classic espionage mission. Yep. Get in, get this piece of intel, get back out, and then you hit them with the dark magic kind of sideways. Come at them and turn that entire session on its head after the first scene. And then literally right after the first scene when you want to hit them with that.
Yeah, so like for me, first scene would be called Asset Hunt. So you assemble a team. You're going to hand out maybe a couple of pictures from the internet, a couple of sat shots of maybe a small village in Afghanistan, and say, all right, here's what you're looking for. Here's an asset. CIA is running this guy. They can't find him, and right now they need you to go out and find this dude. So you're going to move that along. That gives them some idea to ask some questions and do some modern investigation if they need to, right? They can ask questions and go to the various agencies and talk. And then they roll out and get them into a small firefight, do an ambush. Right, and so part of that ambush can be a firefight on top of, hey, there's an IED that didn't go off, so now your fucking demo guy has to do a dramatic task to defuse this IED, right? Or it'll lay waste to their vehicle, and you can penalize them somehow that way. Then they get to the scene, they find the village is empty, then they do their last minute investigation, they're moving up, and they find a dude spread up against the wall, blowing his own fucking brains out with a fucking Tokarov pistol, and in blood or whatever, a seal of Solomon. And there's a seal of Solomon, and he's got a page torn out of the Quran discussing jinn.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Make sure that your monster, your key there is go to the internet, Google up some Middle Eastern monsters, and make sure that you use those because you want that flavor. Jinn
you gotta know Chris is right. You gotta know a little bit. You can't half-ass some of this shit.
I mean, so basically the abandoned village turns into a Cthulhian nightmare over in a second.
Right, there's a
hot second.
Right? Someone summoned a djinn, and this guy was involved in that somehow. But now your next scene is, what do you want to do with that? Was the agency involved, and they knew the guy was a cultist? Is the agency trying to gain power of a jinn, or is this just Al-Qaeda managed to get their hands on some ancient tome to summon a fucking jinn? And so you can have them investigate those three routes as that next phase of investigation and say, like, look, we're just going to use a quick investigation and streetwalk, or the hit the streets rules from like Deadlands Noir, right? Steal what you can from all the savage settings. Mm-hmm. And then they wrap that up, so that's another scene where they're gathering.
Perhaps one of the characters has a contact on the ground.
Absolutely, because they will, right? They're all operators, and what I do with games like that is not only do I reward you for gaining the information, right? We're moving the story along, but I will reward you with saying, okay, well, you've done this. You talked to maybe one of the anthropologists that's in the field attached to the military, right? Because they do that, and so you're like, all right, well, he is driven you down this path, so now your character is going to gain a +2, against certain aspects of certain things, right? And you start rewarding mechanically and make that end battle easier on them.
So, quick question. So, like with the jinn, shit, I'm flipping through the back of the beast area. There's no jinn. That's okay. Just combine the stats of the air elemental and the lich, and you're good. Yeah, I mean, throw in the fear or puppet power. Throw in the puppet power to fuck with them.
Yeah. If you read the Quran and you read the description of the jinn, I mean, it's 3 suras, and that's it. And that's all you need to know about the Jinn and be like, oh, okay, I could do this. You know, a D6 across the board, except for something they're really good at, right? D8, maybe a D10 if you really want to put that fucking punch and a wild card into them.
Yep, give them 20 power points.
Right?
Right.
As a base.
So scene 1, that's easy.
The other side of that is, as well, give them another scene between, once they've done all of the exploration, once they've done this investigation, give them another scene to do something optional. That way, when you hit that 2-hour point, you go, well, we only got one scene left. I'll grab this other optional thing to throw in front of them, whether it's a sudden chase scene that, they got spotted and now it's getting away, so go through a chase. Get yourself places both to cut as well as to add to that at the table.
Oh, and how about hang on. Wait, let me get this thought out. For towards the end, my thought was that final battle, you have it with the Jinn, but when they walk in, they see their commanding officer. He's either puppeted, he's a double agent, he's double-crossed them.
He's
something.
An illusion. Yeah, it's just taking that form.
But I like the fact that maybe he's double-crossed them, and he's working for these guys now. And so now you've got the Jinn, but now you've got their commanding officer who's going to even give it more of that punch at the end.
Right, because now you're calling the hindrances of loyal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Is he a double agent? Oh, shit, we don't know.
Code of honor.
Right. Is he working for them? What's going on?
And I was going to interject. Well, wait a minute. So the guy, summoned a Jinn and blew his head out. Okay, why did he do that? What's the motivation? What led up to that? And there's another scene or another big bad guy. Maybe he was going to be forced to release some kind of portal on the entire fucking world. And he was like, well, boom, I'll fuck him with a Jinn. And why did he do it? Why? What was the motivation? And maybe harvest that for a plot seed.
Right. And then with Chris's is perfect because you can have a social conflict between them and their commanding officer, right? If they play it right, don't murder hobo it. And then the end result, if they win that social conflict, then the Jinn dispossesses, and now they're in the last firefight, right?
Or if they win by enough, they've now convinced the Jinn to come back over to their side, and now you've got a climax that required no bloodshed.
Absolutely.
Players, we've talked about this before on the show. That 3 option, the 3 clue rule, when you sit down to plan this out for each card you're going to have, make sure it can go 3 separate directions that you're aware of, and then be willing to think on your feet when the players come up with a 4th and a 5th that they want to try that you didn't think of.
You could also mire them there once okay, great, the Jinn's there. The apparently abandoned village turns out not so abandoned. Maybe there's a bunch of undead closing in and just keep pouring in and pouring in. You can put a ticking time clock on it to increase the tension.
Yep.
So this turned into a modern horror story really fucking quick.
I want to run this.
The other side of that is, even if you've got this going toward a confrontation with the Jinn, there's not going to be the undead. There's not going to be a lot of those other aspects to it. Have the players over here on the radio sitting off to one side, the call for reinforcements from the village. The Jinn has wiped out the local forces and you mopped up the rest. Well, someone got a call out and you've got X amount of time before the tanks roll in. So now you have to get that done in that ticking clock that's not in the form of waves of enemies that are constantly coming. Right. It's hard, we are going to be wiped out by an airstrike. Something bad this way.
Or make things more difficult. Set it during the day because that is another bait and switch. Do not set this in the dark. Set it in the bright fucking daylight. And then once the Jinn is released and they realize what's going on, fucking everything goes dust because there's a swarm of locusts just everywhere. And it creates that dim lighting, which adds penalties. Yep. It creates this feeling of isolation and, oh, God, we're doomed.
Yep. Here's the thing, right? Don't forget environmental effects, right? You got your locusts. You got smoke from fire or grenade residue. you've got fear, you've got dust. If you're one of the lucky 99% of the planet who've never been to Afghanistan, let me tell you,
heat.
Heat. Yeah, heat.
Day and ice cold. It's bitter. It's
fucking cold as
during the day and bitter cold at night.
You're loaded down in tactical gear and it's 120, and that's in the shade. Why don't you give me a vigor roll, bitches, and a -2 because it's hot.
Yeah, how you enjoying that? Oh no! I mean, you can do all kinds of things to fuck with people, right, and have a good time with it. Yeah. So, and then the rest of the scenes sort of follow out. So
So there you go. So there's a con adventure kind of skeleton prepped out for you with 3 pretty distinct scenes, an intro, a middle plot point where everything gets complicated, and then a climax. And there you go. Done, and done. You can bare bones that out.
During the airstrike, right? If they're letting it ring danger close, and they got to get the fuck out, forces could easily have, mobile vehicles, right? Anything. Jesus Christ, from BMPs down to, the shithole Toyota truck with a fucking Recoilless rifle mounted on the back of it.
Right. I would always say, too, give them a nuclear option. I like the whole the Aliens franchise. The whole, okay, we're surrounded, we're low on ammo, they're acid, we got to nuke them. It's the only way to be sure. So let's get to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and be like, hey, they're part of your adventure. Oh, shit, you uncovered a fucking suitcase nuke from the Soviet days.
Mm-hmm. Give them those kind of things. And do you set off the nuke?
Right.
Do you go out in a blaze of glory and take your entire team with you? And that's going to cause a sort of tension in role play at the table, too, among the characters. Like, no, what are you doing? Look, it's the only way.
Yeah, but maybe the Jinn needs that nuke, right? Because Jinn magic Jinns are fire elementals, right? They're fire spirits. And so what better to empower a Jinn's fucking devious plotting than the ultimate fire weapon on the face of the earth? And so now you got 2 factions in a race for a fucking nuclear device.
There you go.
And then,
draw on both popular culture and basic human fear. Another great thing to put in that scene, have a scene that the players have to face one of 2 things. They can use a white phosphorus airstrike from a mortar that they actually trigger themselves, or they have to go through a mass combat. And then make both of those have a very hard mechanical effect on the rest of the game. If they use the white phosphorus, everything reeks of burned human flesh for the rest of the adventure. Everyone's making constant nausea checks. There's smoke everywhere. But if they chose not to do that and go with the mass combat, now they're going to pick up wounds from going through and having to fight their way through this big battle scene. And then you can tie that even into your theme. We're talking about this dark magic theme. All of a sudden they find out that half the soldiers they just wiped out with the white phosphorus weren't soldiers. It was women and kids that were being held back that they couldn't see from their vantage point. So now your players have to deal with a moral indignity that their character has committed, and you throw them these little hooks, stuff that can, if you've got a player who's sitting at the table who maybe really has a weak stomach and you start nailing that gross description of everything, you're going to get a visceral reaction from that player.
You don't want to trigger people, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, feel out your table to go too far. You don't want that player actually retching on the game table, but you definitely want to do things that are going to pull at those heartstrings, get that player emotionally invested in the game.
Right. Now, if we were going to run this at con, the first thing I would do, any one of us should do as a GM, is go, hey, I don't know if you just signed up because it was Savage Worlds or it was in this time slot, but before we start play, I want to make sure everybody understands. This is TVMA.
Yeah.
We're going to deal with violence and social issues and moral issues at this table.
That's what you put in your description. That's what you put in the booklet, those types of things.
Dude, people don't read.
Con, what's the age you're willing to accept?
Yeah. People do not read.
You can put all of that in the documentation ahead of time, but I would still have that social contract moment right at the start of the play to set the temperature of the table. This goes back to that, knowing your table, playing to the strengths and weaknesses of the table. But there's an aspect of it that if the game we've just described can be very visceral violent, or it can be completely Cthulhu-esque with no violence. And if you get a read from your table during that social contract, you might change out 2 scene cards fit that style better.
Right. You're also going to be dealing with a social political topic if you're setting it in Afghanistan.
Sure.
I mean, make sure you understand that, this is, we're not trying to trigger anybody. I want to make sure that you all understand that by playing this game, you're agreeing to the adult tone theme of what we're doing. If you're not comfortable with that, now's the time to duck out.
No, yeah, absolutely. Because they're definitely not changing the con game.
Right.
Yeah,
no, it's change.
It's way too late to change gears now.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, if you're getting,
feel bad about ducking out.
No, you shouldn't. But if your game,
you gotta.
Right, if your game is going to prominently feature violence against children, as an example, make sure you say that at the beginning of the game. So when you got adult parents sitting there that are going to lose their shit the second you start talking about violence against kids, then they have it out.
Like you all to know we're going to be murdering some children this evening. Are you okay with that?
We fit in
well, I mean, if you were gonna do a con version of Children of the Corn, for example,
right?
I mean, or The Village.
Now I want to run Children of the Corn in Afghanistan.
I actually thought about a Children of the Corn game. That's in some notebook of mine somewhere where I was trying to come up with con games, and it just says Children of the Corn.
Dude, yeah.
The best part about this is when Scott said it, I heard Shaun of the Corn. So I went Shaun of the Dead, but Shaun of the Corn.
That's even better.
Oh, they need to make that movie.
Right, and here's the thing. Always don't say no. If you can avoid saying no, don't say no. Say yes. Not only that, and. So, like, if you get somebody that's like, I'm going to climb out on the middle of the Jeep bar going 70 miles an hour through the desert, and I'm going to hood surf that bitch with an AK-47 and strafe all those motherfuckers, say yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely say yes.
Like I said, so the Rift game, that's where that GM was really good because I was playing a juicer. So if you don't know, juicers have a constant flow of essentially PCP going through their bodies, and they only live about 6 years. And the mechanic is that every session you have to roll against your oh, fuck, I already forgot what. I'm having a brain fart. I have had alcohol. There's a number you got to roll against, right? And if you roll higher than that number, then you die that session. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of the campaign or not. You die. But you get to choose how you die. And so he asked me if I was sure how that worked. I knew how it worked and all. I was like, yeah. So we come to this massive battle where it was coalition forces teeing off against some fucking mutants from outer space, teeing off against these mercenaries, teeing off against goblins from fantasy who got rifted in. And this one goblin, the shaman, summoned that chimera, and I was like, time. I know how I die. And he was like, because our mission was to destroy the ship, the spaceship, right? So I was like, well, I'm going to cowboy that motherfucking chimera into the ship, and then we'll plant the bomb, and I'll just hold off everyone from doing demos on the fucking on the device, and I'll just go up, I'll nuke with it. And I was like, bam, done. And he was good to go with that. He's like, you're going to rodeo a fucking chimera? I was like, yeah, you gave me a chainsaw. I'm going to stick it in its fucking clavicles. I'm going to use it like a rudder. And he's like, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, I'll share an example. When I was doing like the monthly mini cons with Savage Worlds back in the day, back like 2012, played a caveman game. I had a player character actually go, okay, he's going to run up to the T-Rex and try to choke it out. Like, hell yeah, he does. Yeah. Exactly, that's exactly what he does. Give me an opposed strength roll. And he's like, well, wait, how am I choking out? And as GM, you go, oh, no, what you do is you crawl up, you sneak up behind it, you climb up behind it, take it by surprise, and you basically end up going this way, laying across its neck and grabbing your feet and just pulling yourself into it to choke it out. That's how you do it. Give me a strength roll. And he's like, and he won. He was like, okay, vigor. It was strength and opposed by vigor. And I rolled like shit, like I always do, and bam, choked out a fucking T-Rex. So
fantastic.
Well,
that's only possible in Savage Worlds for a character to go, I'm going to choke out a T-Rex. Right. For the GM to go, fuck yeah, you are. Go ahead, go for it.
Well, the flip side of that is if a player takes a character in a different direction than what you had imagined when you created that character, let it go. I got a lot of questions about this. Months ago, I did the Savage Worlds kind of I can't think of the name of it. The wire fu, kung fu, martial arts.
Oh, Into the Badlands.
Apocalyptic world. Yeah,
Into the Badlands.
I had put together this game specifically for that. Had a great little session 0 before we went on air to broadcast the game. And the very first scene, one of my players describes like an E-Honda magic attack for the way his power works, when I had specifically said, hey, you have superpowers, but the way they have to work has to be very grounded in reality. And he went completely the other direction, like a Street Fighter character throwing balls of fire and stuff. And I get asked a lot, why didn't I come down on him? Why didn't I stop him? Well, it's a con game. The whole idea is if that's the way that player is going to have fun, it doesn't matter what I had in mind when I designed the character. Let that player have fun with that character the way they want to play.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
let it be badasses.
To kind of work off of that, I think that backstories for characters need to be, like we've talked about, Jared, you've said, 1 or 2 sentences. You don't need 2 pages, because I'm going to sit down at a con table. I read slowly. I'm a slow reader. Everybody's going to be done. I'm still going to be reading these 4 paragraphs. I'm not going to remember any of it, and none of it's going to come into play at the table.
Right.
If I have 2 or 3 sentences about a character, good enough. And then I should be able to take that character in a direction that makes sense off of that.
What I recommend when we're creating characters, and this is part of something Dave and I have talked about over and over again, I'll say it again. Background, don't pre-write your background. This is a collaborative storytelling session. When you come up with this background, what you're doing is you're painting your character's progression and arc into a corner. You're also imposing your grandiose visions of your character on the other players who may or may not want to help you fulfill that. Right. So the best thing that I've found is to let it develop organically. And what you focus on is the concept of the character, finding a way to capture a description of this character's personality and motivations in such a way that it's a 1 or 2 sentence blurb that you could hand to an actor who's auditioning for the role. So you don't talk. Yeah, you don't talk about, oh, well, he's 6'2", he weighs this much. You don't get the driver's license description. Snore, boring. Who gives a shit? Now, if his physicality is important to the character concept, you might come out with something that says, like, John Jones is built like a brick shithouse and covered in scars, and he wears, like, badges of honor.
Yeah.
Done. That informs you everything about that character. You can have another character. He comes from the school of hard knocks. He's boisterous and gregarious, but tends to shoot first and ask questions later. That, I know, is an impulsive character. So what we're saying is if you're building these characters, focus on their personality and motivation and try to encapsulate that and condense that into a sentence. And then let the player interpret what that means and role play it the way they see that character being coming to life.
Yeah, and if you want to do it organically at the table too, right? Do that definitely. You give them those real short descriptions like Jerry gave you, and then like I have a poker die. It's a 4-sider that just has the cards suits on them, right? That's it. And so at some point, like say we're in the middle of a firefight, like so we're back to back and we're fighting off the fucking cultists of Jinn. I might say, roll it and be like, hey, last time you two were in a fucking situation like this and you guys had to go back to back. You guys both suffered a pretty fucking big loss during that combat. What happened? Right? And you give them that real brief moment of a couple of seconds of role playing and getting that out. You tell the bennies out and be like, let's continue now. And let them continue that way.
Yeah, and that's you just interluded somebody.
Yep.
You just in the middle of the thing, you just pulled a card. What's the suit?
Yep.
Spades. That's victory. Yep. This reminds you of a time you kicked ass and took names. Tell me about it. Yeah, exactly.
The other thing I would say is what should be in that blurb should be things like adverbs or actual action words, something that immediately gives that player something they can reuse at the table. If you say Harold James is a mild-mannered garbage collector who is rotund and his only care in life is fishing and ham radio, you've just given them a great character. But if you instead say Harold James is a lazy garbage collector, now they have that action word, lazy. Yeah. They can grab that and put that into their actual play. That's more empowering at a con than it is for your average at-the-table game, where you can be a little more, lackadaisical with those descriptions. Those descriptions need to be on point and immediately drive certain aspects of the personality to the player.
I don't believe I'm going to do this, but yeah, I'm gonna give Monty Cook props on at least one thing. Look at how numeric characters are made. I'm a blank who blanks, right?
Yeah.
That route where I'm a noun or adjective, noun, verb who adverbs, right, or whatever, and you just it's right what Dave is saying. It's very easy.
And also too. So for example, Dave just laid out a character who's got no life ambition,
right,
and is lazy and overweight. Okay, so if you're building that character for the player to play, don't make you can choose not to make the obvious choice. The obvious choice may be, give him hindrance obese. You could. I mean, you could say, hey, he's a big guy, but that's not really the problem.
Nope.
That's not really the core hindrance of the character. The core hindrance of the character is he's on the outside.
Yeah.
Because he's not socially engaged with people. He doesn't meet up to everybody's criteria. And he's a fat platoon man in the middle of all these pumped up, roided out, fit conscious guys. He takes a bit of shit. So don't get too literal with matching description to hindrances. You got to think about that, what the impact of the character's foibles have in the game, not based on, he's fat. I said he's fat, therefore he must have the obese hindrance.
Right. So you really want to take this to an extreme for a con game. What we're talking about is take the parts of Savage Worlds that really matter and distill them down to the most pure form. So you've got hindrances that award bennies. So now you've got this Harold James character who's lazy and rotund. He has quirk, known as disgusting fat body. And he only gets bennies when another player at the table refers to his character as a disgusting fat body.
Yep.
Sorry, guys.
Right. Oh, me talking about triggering people.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, man. Hey, move it, lunchbox. So if another character shouts something like that, then that player character gets the benny, even though he had nothing to do with the role play.
No. That's your character gets the benny.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But you didn't initiate the thing that triggered getting the benny. Yeah. It's here's what the hindrance is, and somebody else in your team gave you a handout by calling you lunchbox or fat ass, or whatever. Mm-hmm.
And now Twitter gets the fucking tweet. Yeah.
Boom, bada, boom, bada, boom.
Okay, so I think this is pretty much a good place to wrap it up. Not so much with the pimp it anymore because, free advertising, fuck that. So, real quickly, if you have a tip, a quick GM tip that you would like to hand out, feel free to do so. We'll start with Chris.
I do have a tip. So everything we've talked about tonight sounds extremely familiar. If you go to the Pinnacle site, go under news, go under conventions, myself and a bunch of Rocky Mountain Savages have a tips for running con games and tips for players at con games up at the PEG site. Go check those out.
That's cool.
Awesome. Dave.
And your mileage may vary.
Well, I know one of the big cons that happens frequently throughout the year is FGCon. We've talked a lot about if you're a virtual tabletop player, there are cons specific for that. Great thing to do for FGCon is drop the $9 and buy the pre-written modules. There's several up there for free, but there's also several up there that you can pick up. They're really quick. You don't have to do all that extra prep of getting special bennies, getting special cards, getting special tokens. It's all done for you. At that point, now you've got a pre-structured thing that you can run that lowers your prep going into that game.
Okay, Dave plays well with others, but doesn't always follow instructions.
Hey, it's a tip. How do you run a
That's
con
a
game for a virtual tabletop?
That's a fucking Pippin.
Buy the prep work. It's not a Pippin.
Buy this product.
No. If I was going to pimp it, I'd say go buy Savage World Pirates of the Sky.
That's okay, Dave. You and I need to talk after the show. Go ahead, Scott.
Man, just be flexible. That's all.
I hear that. And the tip that I will give as a GM is one of the tips I love to give. Make things initially difficult. Use your GM bennies to scare the shit out of the players by making opposed rolls and getting a 12 and going, nah, that's not high enough. And dropping a benny until you get it up to like a 20 or a 40. Just so they're sitting there going, oh, shit, I got to face intimidation. You bastard. Yep. Feel free to dick with your players. It's okay. It's kind of what makes for good drama.
Your job is to create obstacles or conflict. Do it.
Right. So until next time, this is Jared Savage standing gunning for Chris, Dave, and Scott saying keep rolling, stay savage.